All right, I think we're live now. I want to welcome everybody to our weekly conversations with Cougars. As we do each week, we have for many weeks now, we're trying to have great conversations with members who have helped to build our program. The 40 odd years that, I think it was 41
All
school
right,
terms.
I think we're live now. I want to
Oh,
welcome
hold on just a second,
everybody
bud.
to
I'm
our
sorry. Sorry about
weekly
that.
with Cougars.
All right, you'd think I had done this before, but I want to welcome Bud Young as my guest today. Welcome, Bud. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you for having me.
How's everything in your world?
Here in Tallahassee where I live, I've been living for a while, it's not bad.
Well, I hope that, what are we, about 7, almost 8 weeks into this pandemic, and it's just, I don't know if things in the world are starting to settle down, if people are just getting used to it, or a combination of things. I know I don't like it, the new norm, but we got to do what we can, and that's why we're doing these conversations and just trying to enjoy taking trips down memory lane for all of us. And I know that's one of the reasons why I brought you on, and I'm so glad that you're there and you've been so active in our group. And I just want to thank you for all that you've contributed so far, and I'm looking forward to our discussion this evening.
Well, I'm loving it, and I hope I can be as entertaining as some of these last guys have been.
Oh, I have no doubts that we're going to surpass that tonight. But for those of you who don't know, Bud was one of the original Cougars, was a freshman with the first class, and all the way through the state championship, the first team in '81. And we're going to get into a lot of that. But Bud, before we drop way back, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and what you do for a living.
I've been living in Tallahassee since '95. Moved down here from South Carolina. I'm an occupational therapy assistant. Mostly do home health. So, the last couple of months have been pretty crazy. I always tell everybody I'm married to a wife who's farsighted because she's a beautiful woman, and somehow she managed to marry me. I don't know, I'm a lucky guy. And she gave me 2 beautiful kids. I've got, now my kids were in middle school when everybody else I went to school with are grandparents. So, that's an adjustment in itself.
Well, I'm sure that they keep you plenty busy.
They do. Absolutely.
Well, let's take it back to when you were their age. Did you grow up in Dothan? Did you go to one of the junior highs at the time? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Ooh, I guess my history with Northview actually starts at Girard, playing for Coach Hicks. And, and that was an interesting time to say the least, because up until then, I had always played on a league that had some sort of weight limit. And I was going to play junior high football. And when Coach Hicks came around and said, well, what position you want to play? And I said, well, running back, of course. And he kind of looked at me and sized me up a little bit and was like, okay. But before long, I guess it was probably about maybe the 3rd game of the season, I actually became the starter. And I think it's more of attrition. We had several people kind of get hurt, but Kurt Patterson and sorry about that, son calling me, Kurt Patterson and Scott Patterson and Mike Durden, Larry Parker, all those guys. That's where I met them, who ended up being that first real core of players. They were sophomores, so they went to Northview and literally started at the ground, where I was lucky enough to make it to the 9th grade.
so you started out at Girard and then came over to Northview.
Got over to Northview.
When was the first time you visited the campus?
Oh my gosh, it looked huge. Of course, you know how, especially from the road, you know, it's all spread out and it just looks monstrous when you would pull up on it out there. But of course, you know, it was unfinished. There was so much, you know, for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, we had to carry every book we, you know, given to us from class to class to class.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was horrible. Even though some of the lockers were finished, they made everybody carry all their books.
When do you remember seeing the first paraphernalia or memorabilia or jerseys, posters, those kind of things for Northview? Were you still at Girard, or was it not until that summer before you came over?
You know, we had been making, obviously, with all the excitement of going, thinking that, you know, there had not been a 9th grade in high school at Dothan High, in probably, I don't know, 50 years. Really don't know when that date was, but, you know, we would venture out there and try to circle around and try to peek in the windows and see what was going on. But, you know, Northview was built, to be honest with you, my first thought was, oh my gosh, they're going to send us to school at a prison. You know, little tiny, you know, little tiny windows trying to peek in. You couldn't see anything, you know. You know, there was no grass to be seen or anything else like that. But, you know, it was time. You were going to be a Cougar, so, you know, it's time to get used to it. You had to quit, you know, hollering for Tigers. You know, it was a hard thing to do.
Well, I was going to ask you, had you grown up rooting for Dothan High?
Well, we moved to Dothan when I was about 10. So I had grown up in a much smaller town, so small that we didn't even have a football league. So we were going to play, we played football, but we had one team for the whole city, or I would call it a city, a town. And have to go to like Pensacola and play games on Saturdays. That's how small it was. And it was so small that, I mean, I think I was 6 or 7 playing in an 8, 9, and 10-year-old league.
Oh, wow. Just because of the number of kids.
Yeah, just to have enough to have the team. Now, we ended up being pretty good. But, you know, that was just, you know, that was how small it was. And when I got to Dothan, and I'm like, every school's got a team. Oh my gosh. And there's more than one elementary school. Who knew that even existed?
Well, very, very good. Well, I want to tell you, we got a bunch of folks that have joined us and want to say hello. We got Jason Mullins and Kevin Jackson and Charles Bronson, Coach Andrews, Allison Hollis, Judge Ingram, Lori Ingram. Let's see, Hunter Parrish, Jonelle Walsingham, Kirkland. Bunch of folks are in here, Bud. Say hello to you. So thank you all for joining. We're talking with Bud Young on Conversation with Cougars, and we're kicking it old school. We're going back to the first years of the school, and that's where I want to come to. Did you always know Steve Stutz just joined us? Bud, did you know that you wanted to play sports in high school, or was that something that was decided after you got over to the school?
Well, like I said, growing up in such a small town, it required everybody to play. If you're going to have a baseball team, you know, there was only enough kids to have 4 teams. So your whole season was playing the other 3 teams all the time. And so, yeah, there was never any doubt that I was going to play. Now, basketball was a new thing for me when I got, like I said, I'd been playing baseball since I was 6, and in this little town, we never even heard of T-ball. So at 6, we were throwing to each other.
Sure.
How long those games were? They probably never got out of the first inning.
Well, who were your coaches when you first came onto campus? Who were the 9th grade football coaches at the time?
It was the basketball coach, Coach Kirkland, Coach Tribute. You know, Coach Tribute was the JV basketball coach, and Coach Kirkland was the head coach. And so that first day we showed up, it was kind of similar to Coach Hicks. You know, when I told him, I said, yeah, I want to be a running back. Well, Coach Curtin says, what's everybody going to do? And I'm like, well, yeah, I was running back in junior high. You know, he's like, And sure enough, I started, but I got to be honest with you now. I was running back in description only. I think it turned out that I was just the fastest lineman we had.
Oh, that's funny.
Because Herschel Bird was the other running back. And needless to say, it got so bad that I had to talk to Herschel about when we would run sweeps that I said, Herschel, you got to go deeper, because he was beating me to the end before I could get there to block anybody. He was already running past me. And so, you know, if anybody, I guess if they'd had game films in the 9th grade, they would have realized, because I started, instead of lining up behind the guard, I was lining up behind the tackle just to try to beat him out there.
Well, Bud, did you have any idea those first days and weeks that team would ultimately, as seniors, have such a magical senior football season?
I'll be honest with you, no, because at Girard, we went like 1-9. Mm-hmm. That core of guys that ended up being so good, you know, including the class ahead of us. You know, and to think that, oh my gosh, you know, we're going to actually win the state championship. I talked to Coach Pierce one time, one of the last times I got to talk to him in person, and I asked him, and he said that he thought, you know, hey, we got some guys here that got potential to do it. But I don't think any of us ever really thought that. I think from day one, we all thought that we were going to have to work hard just to win the game. Forget in 13 games.
Well, Bud, were any of the guys in your grade, in the 9th grade, did they move up and play JV and varsity, or was everybody kept on the 9th grade team that year?
Now that year, everybody was left on the 9th grade. Nobody moved up. And I got to be honest with you. If they had asked me to move up, I'd been scared to death. You know, we had all gone out to the Rip Hughes Stadium and seen some of the practices, and I was like, holy cow, this is real, people. And I was very grateful to be on the 9th grade team at that time. I mean, so many guys out, and it seems like I remember seeing bodies carried off every day.
When did you get your first glimpse at Brent Gilbert's talent or Larry Roberts' talent?
Now, see, Brent and I played together in Little League. We were both linebackers on the Dolphins. And you know, Brent was a standout then. Mm-hmm. Linebacker, and I would be the other. And if the other team ran 35 plays, then, you know, Brent probably had 20 solo tackles, and I may have, you know, 14, and somebody else got one. So, I mean, there was no doubt about that. Now, I didn't meet Larry until high school. And what I guess when I really started seeing Larry blossom was actually playing basketball with him. You know, you really got an idea that, you know, wasn't even during the football season, it was the basketball season that I thought, man, this guy's taking off. He's going to be a force to reckon with. And sure enough, he is.
He was. I want to welcome Mark Chambliss, who says hello, Kevin Christ, Sissy Carol Reynolds. Thank you guys for stopping by, saying hello, and shout outs to Bud. Now, Bud, talk to us a little bit about your memories of that 9th grade football season. Just you're now at the high school. It's a huge high school, obviously, physically the plant or the campus. You have the luxury of practicing down in the pit, as we all did for many years, down there in the hole. Just what are some of the standout memories that you had from that first few months on campus and playing?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, it's hard to just narrow it down. I sometimes I feel like an hour is just not going to be enough. Being down there, and a lot of us played both ways. And I really loved, I mean, it was great to play. I don't think I ever came off the field. I punted, Some I kicked off. I was on the kickoff return team, the punt return team, played halfback and full linebacker. And so I was loving it, to say the least. And we ran like a 4-4 scheme, 4 linebackers, 4 down linemen. Like I said, it was just so much more fun. It was loose and fast and a great bunch of guys. Not quite the sign of things to come of the total seriousness, what it was going to be in the 10th grade year. We had a lot of good times with it. You know, if I had to say I had any drawbacks, was I spent 2 years as a running back and never scored a touchdown. that's the only, if I had to find a downside, that's it.
Well, what about, I know you played basketball. I know you were on a very good baseball program as well. When you came over to basketball, you know, with football usually overlaps the beginning of basketball season, depending on, I guess, how deep you play into the season. But 9th grade, you don't have playoffs and things. How many of you came over from the 9th grade team to play basketball for Coach Tribb or Coach Kirkland at the time?
Coach Hicks was a 9th grade basketball coach.
So he came over to Northview the same time you did with y'all's class? Okay, I wasn't sure.
So when when that first year when I was in the 9th grade, he left me in head coach at Girard to be in the defense coordinator at Northview. And I guess because he had a little basketball experience having to coach at Girard, he took over the 9th grade team. And I got to be honest with you, we were surprisingly good. Now, I didn't think so at the time, but we were short. We actually made it to the playoffs in the 9th grade year. And the way they did it was the south part of the state ended up with the champion and the north part of the state ended up with the champion, and they would play each other.
And is this 9th graders or is this JV?
Yes, 9th graders.
Just 9th graders?
Just 9th grade. You can be junior high with 8th and 9th graders or just all 9th graders. But we got that tournament.
Football players were from 9th grade were on your team, on the basketball team?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. Brad Kennington, Reggie Rhodes, Scott Patterson. Oh no, I don't think Scott played that year.
And if any of you watching remember what that roster was like, I'm just curious how many multi-sport athletes were in that class, because I bet you there were a bunch who also played baseball in the spring from that 9th grade.
Well, there would have been even more so. You would be surprised. And I mean, if you want to talk about baseball, I can tell you about all the multi-sport guys there. There weren't quite doing basketball. There might have been 3 or 4 of us that were playing football and basketball. And we were surprisingly good, and I was surprised at just how short we were when we got out next. I can remember going to play in one of the games, and the guy that I was having to guard was 6'6".
And you were how tall at that time?
About 5'6".
Oh boy! Oh,
and boy. I was a 5'6" forward. So,
wow. Well, Bud, I want to tell you, we got Mark Kingery, Josh Andrews, Damon Glasgow, Eric Easley. Thank you guys. Everybody dropping in for a few minutes for my chat tonight with Bud Young. So you get into baseball season that spring. Now, did you play 9th grade or did you move up, or what was that team about?
Well, I don't know how Coach Johnson did it, but he was coaching 9th grade, JV, and varsity all at the same time.
Yeah, he was still doing that when I was there, but they were just starting. And I came in, I was the class of 86. So I'm not that much younger than you, but he was still overseeing all 3 programs, and then slowly was bringing on some other coaches or assistants to help out. I don't know how he did it.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that in the 9th grade, I thought we had potential. Now, we generally just played a bunch of round robins where we would play some small schools and maybe even play their varsities. 3 or 4 teams there, and you play a couple of innings against just about everybody. And we beat everyone. in those type of situations, and which gave me I'm like, hey, this is a good group of guys. These guys got potential, and that's in the 9th grade, watching them all play. And then when we got to JV, it was same thing. I mean, the winning kept on. And good solid pitching, which is usually hard to find in high school. More, usually if you have somebody got one, you ride that guy to the end. But we had plenty of guys who could take the mound and get quality starts in, and guys who just hit a ton. I mean, just of course, the field is so big. It's not like you're going to get a whole lot of home runs. But
where were you? Were you playing at Northcut at Westgate Park?
No, we were playing over. I can't think of the baseball field over at Rippey Stadium.
Oh, I didn't realize that, because we started playing at Northcut, at the end of Westgate, at the end of the old runway. So I wasn't sure when they transitioned over to there. But let me ask you: you had played all 3 sports for the school.
Yeah.
At the time, did you have a favorite by the end of that season?
If I'd always have to lean toward football.
Mm-hmm.
I just love knocking things over, and played right into it. Now my Coach Kirkland said I was a pretty decent basketball player for a guy as short as I was. But I contributed whatever I had in basketball. First of all, I contributed a big part of my mother. She taught me how to play. My mother was the most valuable player in the state of Tennessee in basketball. And the rest was just playing football, because it didn't matter how hard you hit me. It didn't bother me. Most of the time when a foul was called, I thought I had done something wrong, but usually
Right.
much taller guys trying to make me eat every shot that I took and ended up fouling me. So I spent a lot of time on the free throw line.
Oh, I know what I meant to ask you. Oh, by the way, Steve Stutt says it's Pittman Field you may have been thinking of.
There you go. I knew Steve would know.
Thank you, Steve.
The reason why I was pretty decent at basketball. He would work me hard every day at his house.
Awesome. And I know you grew up across the street from Mark Chambliss.
Yes. And Kevin Chris ride to school with me.
And Mark's younger brother, Rick, was in my class at Northview. But I wanted to ask you, I don't mean to skip around. You were there for the very first pep rally for the varsity game in '78. I assume it was held in the gym. Do you have any recollection of either that pep rally or other ones from that season?
Oh my gosh. It was, of course I'm sitting up with the other students. It was dang near intimidating. I mean, you're talking about a place, I've never experienced anything like that. I mean, the student body was just rip roaring and ready to go. And like I said, and I think most of us who were freshmen were pretty much intimidated by the whole experience. We're like, holy cow.
No, I bet it was awe-inspiring from those first days.
It really was. And I can only imagine if they had been hollering for me, how I would have felt.
Well, let's take it to there. Let's get into 10th, 11th grades. When did you see your first varsity football action?
Well, I actually, in the 10th grade, if I remember correctly, Scott Patterson and I were both listed amongst the starters. So we were the only 10th graders on the defense that were listed there. Now, did we start? No, I played behind Jimmy Lewis and Dennis Douglas, 2 big monsters themselves. And but I did get to see a lot of good quality playing time, and Scott as well, which really helped for the next season. So it was pretty much right away that that we were getting in. Not even I don't want to say garbage time, but I mean we were seeing action in the first quarter, second quarters of the game.
And was Coach Hicks your coach at the time?
He was, yeah. Well, Coach Johnson was doing linebackers in the ends, and I was considering an end.
Mm-hmm.
And Coach Hicks was the head coach, early defensive coordinator.
What do you recall about your first varsity game, your first action, just knocking helmets? And were you nervous? Did you throw up before the game? Did you tell us? Take us into that.
I want to tell you, I have thrown up before games. It in Montgomery at Crampton Bowl for some reason. But I think it happened so fast, I didn't really have time to kind of process what was happening.
Right.
Alfred and I have exchanged some emails about being on the turd squad. Coach Parrish would holler down, "Send me my jewels," and Coach Hicks would say, "All right, turd squad, let's go." And so you would the other end of the field, and you'd get a chance. I had the opportunity to stand there and let Steve Ince and Doug Jones run me over on a regular basis, with a 5, 6, 7 yard head start, and not have the opportunity to move out of the way. And and I'll tell you,
to let you know, Doug actually spoke to Doug today, and he's going to come on the show in a few weeks.
Oh man, well, what I had said, during that was that by the time I took the field against another team, there was nobody they could put across the side over there to intimidate me. It's been run over by the best.
Say, did you go against Dwight Jones, Doug Jones, Woo Woo?
Oh, I may have said Doug, but well, of course, Doug came later, but it was Dwight and Steve, and they would just take turns leaving cleat marks on me. And I remember the day that Coach Hicks said, "All right, turd squad, go," or I guess Coach Parrish hollered for the jewels to come on. And I started running down there, and Coach Hicks told me I didn't have to go. That was I'm like, I've either done something wrong or I've done something right. I couldn't quite figure it out yet. And that was the first point of saying, hey, I'm actually going to see some decent playing time now.
And then later on, you had the luxury of going up against Larry Roberts. If he's playing tight end and you're playing defensive end, I bet that was fun.
Well, see, at that time, usually when I went in, just because if I went down on the weak side, it's a weak side defensive end, then Lewis would go over to and play on the strong side. And so, I never had to worry about that.
Okay, so Larry was on the strong side as the tight end.
He would be playing on the strong side, yeah. So I'd be over there without anybody over me, and which was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that, not having have anybody try to block me on a regular basis. That was great. So the downside of that was I had to play next to Andy Johns, and Andy Johns was very selfish. He tried his best not to let me have any tackles ever. I did, Mr. Johns, do you think I could be in on this tackle today? And he's like, no.
No, I don't think so. Well, if you recall leading up to your senior year, I want to take us back to the summer of '81. That's leading into your senior year of school, and you guys are prepping for the season. I assumed you had a spring training that spring, or maybe in the early summer. I'm not sure how they did it at the time, but then you certainly had fall camp a few weeks prior to the season beginning. And as a senior, I remember that time period just being, this is our last go. We got to make it count. And I remember just having lots of conversations, like I mentioned one the other night, of having a great conversation with Lawrence Dawsey and several of the seniors from my class. And it really always stuck with me. Do you recall any similar meetings or conversations or a feeling amongst the players, the seniors, leading up to that fall camp?
Well, during the spring, before the '81 season, not so much, because there were a lot of guys. We were talking about the baseball team. There were a lot of guys that were, backup players on the football team who were starters on the baseball team, and they didn't want to have to go through spring training because they're like, hey, we've got a really good chance of making a run for it. And we felt like that in baseball. Didn't necessarily have that same feeling in football just yet. I don't think it was probably maybe 2 weeks out from our first game that I really stopped and look at the huddle and to stand there and look at the eyes of everybody and go, oh my gosh, senior, 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 a junior, senior, 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 senior. And I'm like, man, if we can't make a run with this many seniors, and then most everybody's backup being a senior, and on my back, Charles Bronson, kudos to Charles. Charles, I think, helped make me a better player because he was always after me to take my spot. So
Charles,
I've got plenty of stories about Charles.
Well, let me pause you for just a second. I know that y'all had a great baseball season in either 80 or 81. Which team was it that was on the verge of making
81? And 81, and like I said, you're talking about first baseman was a defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
Baseman had played wide receiver. Third baseman was a linebacker. Shortstop was a running back. Left field was defensive end. Right field had played defensive back. So there was a lot of football players out there during that time.
And there was a young guy, a lefty who got picked in the 4th round in the 84 draft by the Mets named Barry Hightower.
He had a little bit to do with our success.
Was he on that 81 team? And
he was, and he was throwing smoke then. And
just as a side note, my sophomore year was Barry's senior year. He's 2 years older than me. I had the pleasure, now he's a lefty. I had the pleasure of playing third base. I started at third base that year. I didn't see very many balls unless Wes Whitfield threw it down to me after strike 3. Barry had a season in 84. We lost in the semifinals to Fairhope. But I was thinking back, that 81 team must have had Barry and Wes on it as 9th graders.
Wes was catching and Barry was rotation. The other big starter we had was Ronnie Dye. I remember correctly, I think he was a lefty also.
He was a neighbor of mine.
Mm-hmm. And the problem is that Ronnie had been such a good pitcher for so long that sometimes I felt like we as a team let Ronnie down. Mm-hmm. Positive attitude, but we were like, oh, okay. And then when somebody hit one, we were like, oh crap, somebody put the ball in play. Yeah, that was a great team. And a lot of people don't realize how close we were to going to the championship. Mm-hmm. We were literally one play away. And I debate the outcome of that one play because I was involved in it. It was we were playing Jeff Davis, who we'd already beaten before, and had a 2-1 lead on him, and it was late in the game. And I believe it was a ball into the hole to Philip Braswell playing short. And he came up throwing, and the ball was up the line. And so I reached out, and I'm sure my foot came off the bag. Uh-huh. It was so far, I was going so far. But when the guy dove across me, I flipped my arm up and hit him across the back of the foot on the foot as he went over the top of me. And they called him safe. And when I tried, we tried to appeal and they wouldn't take it, and they wouldn't appeal the call, and we ended up losing 3-2.
Well, I'm wondering if that 81 baseball season and 81 football season is the best outcome for two teams in one season by the same group of athletes. And I bet some of the coaches and historians on this will be able to tell us about that. But that's awesome. You guys have a great spring 81 baseball season. You head into the 81 football season with all seniors just about.
Yeah.
Who do you open up the season with that year? Do you recall any of the schedule?
Oh my gosh. It seems like we normally opened up with Ozark.
Yeah, they later became late in the season. I'm going to look it up as you're talking, but what I want to ask you is just some of those first part of the season memories, because you guys basically steamrolled the schedule except for one blip on the radar. It was the most dominant season in Northview history, going 13-1. And at times you made it look pretty easy, but I know it wasn't. But that was also the product of 3 very tough years building to get to that point. So share some of that with us.
Well, I'll start off by saying it's dominant as everybody makes out the 81 defense to be. They forget about what the 79 defense was like.
Mhm.
They gave up 1 point a game less than we did.
Right.
Do you think about that? And so those are the guys we got to look up to. And so those first few games, by the first game, I think defensively, we felt like when we lined up that we could stuff anything. It's not often that a high school team can put down 4 defensive linemen without missing a click.
Mhm.
Able to rotate them in and out. And then defensive backs that are all running 4-4, 4-3s, whatever it happens to be, but they were just blistering fast, and so you've got guys who can cover anywhere on the field. So throwing the ball doesn't do you a whole lot of good. And you're not going to have any time because you got 4 defensive linemen that are ready to chew you a new one as soon as you stop moving your feet.
And you had a very accomplished quarterback, David Alford, until he got hurt. And then Dickey comes in and just plays so admirably. But I want to take you, first game was Carroll. Y'all stomped them 28-6. You beat Prattville in overtime, 21-14. And then the team, I think it was one of the Achilles heels for the Northview program, was Sidney Lanier. You lost in overtime at Sidney Lanier, 28-24. That was the most points the team gave up the rest of the season, well, for the whole year. You then stomped Crisp County, Kendrick, Pine Forest, Carver Montgomery, Selma, Enterprise, and that leads us into the Dothan game, which traditionally ended the season, and that was a 10-3 win. You got to take us to that time period and the Dothan game. It's the first, I guess it was the very first time that Northview really was on the cusp of doing something really big, because at that point you'd only lost 1 game, having won the last 8 in a row.
Well, really, I think and most people I think would say the same thing. That one loss I think really refocused everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really that one loss hinges on one play. I just happened to be in line to see that the Lanier player push off on our DB. I don't remember exactly who that was, but pushed off, causing him to fall, catches the ball and runs the length of the field. And I'm screaming at the umpire, how do you not see that?
Mm-hmm.
From that point on, I think we realized that, this is not going to be a cakewalk. You got to go up for it every day. And I think back to what at practices, I guess the coaches decided that defense, you guys are not in shape. And so while the offense would finish running, plays and stuff like that, getting their timing down, we're running suicides for 30 minutes back and forth across the field.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like, torture, then, but I think it played out so that by the time we got down to the Dothan game, and, we're playing, by the time you play your crosstown rival, you're playing with guys you've been playing with for 12 years,
I was just getting ready to say, you probably had friendships across the line, and they weren't friends that night, that's for sure. But y'all took care of business, and then you head into the playoffs. And frankly, those were some just legendary games. Murphy, Foley, I think JD, and then finally Carver of Birmingham. But had you ever visited Legion Field before the team went up the Tuesday before the big game?
No.
How awesome, how was that day, that Tuesday visit?
It was really very funny because it was just like turning a bunch of kids loose on a playground where everybody's running around and they're grabbing at each other and rolling on the ground and running from goalpost to goalpost to lean against it like Bear Bryant. No matter who you pull for, everybody would say, I'm gonna be up here like Bear.
That turf, while it was unique, it was awful. It was like,
oh my God,
it was like playing.
It's like putting carpet over concrete.
Yeah. I think the padding, if you even want to call it, wasn't even an inch thick. It was just.
Did it have padding?
You're right.
I can tell you this: if you fell one way, you might slide for 10 yards, but if you fell the other way, you're with hide missing off of you.
Yeah. I want to welcome David Mitchell, but what about? We used to always, kid now, but we used to call it the turf monster. You never knew when you were going to trip or your foot would get caught, or heaven forbid, where the seams were sewn in the turf, your foot could get caught underneath.
Yeah. Well, something that's always bothered me about that whole thing is that, we didn't have any turf shoes, and so everybody was trying to bring every pair of tennis shoes they had to go there. And I think a couple of schools sent us some of their shoes, and then, to try on. Carver had played, even their away games were played on Legion Field. So they had already played 13 games on that field that season.
I was going to say that a lot of the Birmingham high schools, especially the city schools, used to play there all their games. So I'm not surprised. Well, take us to the sidelines the day of the game. That's got to be just something that's always in your mind and memory.
Well, I remember talking to Coach Hicks about it, and he says, "How's it? You all right?" And I'm like, I said, "It just feels weird, Coach." I said, it feels like I just rolled out of bed and we're going to, now we got this serious game, the timing of it, playing early. And he pointed out, he goes, "It's the same time we dress out to go to practice."
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like that. And I thought, well, okay, all right. Yeah, I see what you're talking about. But the thing that probably got me the most was that we had practice kicking and, with brand new shoes. You spend all year long punting and kicking and, without these shoes. And we get the game and they tell us, you can't wear those shoes. Right? Because they still had cleats on the bottom of it. And so now we're like, okay, now we got to find different shoes to put on to try to kick with. Mm-hmm. And go out there and we're getting ready to tee the ball up to kick off. And the referee comes over and says, "You can't kick with that ball." We're like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, that ball's too old." So we played the game kicking in shoes we had never kicked in before, kicking balls we had never kicked before.
Were these Birmingham-based refs? Do you know?
I really don't, but
yeah.
That, when you go back and say, well, the kicking game wasn't as sharp as it had been, it was like starting all over again.
Mark Kingery has some comments. He said it really felt like a practice, but it was weird to be on that turf to play in the middle of the day. Do you remember the kickoff being early?
Yes, I do. And it really was. It really felt, like I said, it just felt off. I felt like I needed 2 or 3 more hours for my mind to really be synced in the way it,
Sure.
I would wanted it to have been.
Now, in your mind's eye, there were 50, 60, 80,000 people in the stadium that day,
It had to be at least 3 times that.
Easily, but in reality, it was probably 20,000, I'm guessing. Okay. I'm still mad at my parents for not letting me catch a ride. I was in 8th grade and desperately wanted to come to the game. Caught it on the radio. But anyway, everybody who will say that they were there, that's for sure. But the intensity in the second half must have just been unreal, because it ended up being a 7-6 win. We all know that. But we didn't know the outcome until very late. And did you recall any of the being on that sidelines and hearing the coaches and the players and everything that y'all were doing, just how intense it was?
Well, I can tell you, I was definitely feeling the pressure. Against Jeff Davis, I probably had the game of my career. Mm-hmm. 3 sacks, best punting day I'd ever had. In my mind, I was kicking it 60 yards. Really, it might have been 35, but it was one of the best days I'd had. And then suddenly I'm here and get a punt blocked. And those guys were fast. I mean, they were back. Matter of fact, I probably should have had 2 of them blocked. I think I kicked one of them underneath them. They'd already jumped past me by the time I got it off.
Wow.
So I was definitely feeling that pressure of, I got to get this ball away quick. And then you go down to, late in the game, and we're like, on the 2-yard line, and it was 4th down, and we got to kick out of it. And so I was, standing there, I'm thinking, man, I got to, not only am I not, I'm closer to them than I've been all day long, but now I'm in the back of the end zone. So
you're probably 12, 13 yards at the most from the line of scrimmage.
You know what? I took one big giant step towards Johnson, just to say, now Joseph was probably the only guy I've ever met who could have gone pro right out of high school, skipped high school and go to pro. He was one incredible long snapper.
And guess who just signed on? Say that again, because he just signed on to say
Did he? Joseph Johnson. All right, Joseph, the only player I've ever known that could have gone from junior high school to the pros as a long snapper. If he had weighed 100 pounds more, he'd probably have been Pro Bowl at 16 years old.
Well, how deep into the game was your punt out of the end zone?
Golly, it was late in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it was leading up to their very last hurrah.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the ball, and I don't remember how much pressure they were trying to put on a return. I think they were trying the block. I think most everybody was up and they had one guy back, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just trying to get it out, and it ended up kind of going end over end once it hit the ground. So I got a pretty good roll out of it. All being said, and I was just so grateful that I didn't drop it, or drill it into the back of Joseph or something like, something stupid, just to get it out of there.
You did your job. You did your job.
But I want to tell you, leading up to it, I thought I had lost the game for us.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to move a couple of minutes down the road, Coach Hicks had told me, he goes, all right, I want you not to play on the line. I want you to play back off the line, maybe back where the cornerback would play. And so I lined up on a wide receiver. And so I jam him on the line, and I follow him downfield, and time's running out, and he's looking back over his shoulder. I'm looking back over my shoulder, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? You're a defensive end. Why are you 30 yards downfield? And so I'm thinking, okay. And then I look back, and I see their quarterback rolling around, and he's standing right where I was, all by himself. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm either going to have to make a one-on-one tackle, or he's slinging it to the end zone. And I guess that moment of indecision, the guy kind of got away from me. Not like I was going to run with a wide receiver, right? Mm-hmm. And so I peeled back around thinking, okay, this is my job, was this area right here. So I turn around and start coming back for him, and then he slings it loose. I think he could have thrown it clean out of the stadium. Look, he threw it so far. And I turned around and looked, and there was the guy I was following, standing in the end zone, all by himself. And I just sunk. I can't tell you the disappointment that ran through me at that moment, thinking, I freaking lost this game for us. I should have stayed with it all the way down. And then, it was Pye, that came through. Timothy Whaley came out of nowhere across the field, tips it out of his hand. And like I said, I just felt like, oh my God, Tim, you have lifted the weight of the world off my shoulders by just tipping that ball. More me than anybody else in the whole stadium, maybe anybody else in the state at that moment. I had the biggest relief.
I think it was Pye, and I'm trying to get a copy of the state game, and I'm going to put it up on YouTube and share it to this page so everybody can watch it. I love these stories, Bud. You're taking us right to the field. You're taking us to not places where the fans or any of us who weren't there we don't know those experiences. So I want to thank you for sharing all of that. That's a hell of an experience. It's an awesome story with a beautiful outcome at the end.
Oh man, it couldn't have been any more. It was like a movie. So much change go on personally in my feelings in such a short period of time. The time to run one single play. Mm-hmm. From thinking I've got this to, oh my gosh, I've given it up, to, oh my gosh, we just won this thing.
Well, we've got about 5 more minutes before we got to get out of here, but I don't know how many folks know outside of your class that you played collegiately, you played a sport collegiately, but we haven't even been the sport yet. It wasn't baseball, it wasn't basketball, it wasn't football, but it was what?
I ended up getting a tennis scholarship. Of all things.
You got to tell us how you landed that one.
It's not like I'd never played tennis. I grew up playing a lot of tennis. We had a tennis court in our neighborhood. And I got to where I could actually beat most of the men, even though I was 13.
Mhm.
And, but it got to where there was nobody else left for me to play. So I just kind of put it away. And Vince McMullen, was it Vance Anderson, was on the team. And he came one day and says, "Hey, you played a lot of tennis in your day, didn't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, back in the day." And he says, "We are decimated at Wallace on the tennis team. If you got to come out and try out, I'll come and I'll practice with you, and we'll get you, and we'll go try out and we'll see how it works out." Well, turns out every time I'd called him to go practice, he was always busy. Turns out he was busy playing with somebody else that he had recruited also. So I show up, and it was a ladies coach, and she said, "All right, you guys just play. Y'all play a set, and let's see who wins." I lost 6-0. They win a game. And she called me to the side and asked me, she goes, "So, how'd you get ready for this?" I said, "Well, I had to borrow a tennis racket from Steve Stutz. He let me borrow one of his old ones. And I just hit it up against the wall for the last 2 or 3 weeks." He said, "You've been playing by yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, you definitely got raw talent. We need to confine it." And I'm like, "What do you mean we need to refine it?" She goes, "I'm going to let you have the scholarship." And I was like, "What? I didn't win a game. Were you watching?" She said, yeah. And so I ended up playing with the girls every day, and they were killing me. And but a couple of guys took me under the wing and brought me along. And finally, I was winning some matches at the collegiate level. Who would have thought, having not played tennis in 5 years?
It's always so interesting to me that how people get to where they end up, and it's the journey. And whether it's a story where it comes out of literally nowhere and you end up making a situation that you probably the day before you were offered the scholarship had no clue it was coming your way, but clearly you made the best of it. And I mean, these have been some awesome stories, Bud, and I can't thank you enough for spending this time just sharing all of this history with us.
We've only scratched the surface with some of these guys. I've got plenty of stories on a lot of them. Some we can tell here and some we can't.
Well, we've got, I may come back to you as my second go around guest when we get down the road. But I'm so glad of the outreach and the community that we've been building here. Got Bruce Johnson, who was a freshman that year and played, he graduated in '84. Bruce just terrorized wide receivers and quarterbacks and offensive coordinators. He was so great. He was 2 years ahead of me, but he was a couple of years behind you. But Bruce is going to join me next week. We've just got a whole host of folks lined up, including hopefully Coach Hicks, hopefully Coach Griffin, and we're going to get into some more great stories in the upcoming weeks. But Bud, I want to thank you for spending this time with us tonight.
It's been a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying the whole series.
Well, thank you. And guys, I really appreciate a bunch of your teammates have popped in here tonight with some good comments. I'm sure there's still, JJ wants to thank you for, he'll be sending you a check. So thank you for the shout out. Kingery was so glad that JJ was the lead snapper because he was the backup at that time. So you can check those out and comment. Guys,
I see Charles talking about my touchdown. I finally got a touchdown.
Oh, I totally missed it. Tell us about that before we get out of here. Bud intercepted the pitch and ran for a touchdown.
I was a junior, and it was homecoming against Selma.
Mm-hmm.
They were running an option, and Danny Carmichael, I was playing next to Danny. He was strong side tackle, just blew through the line so fast that the quarterback never made it to me to option off of. And I'll be honest with you, it was just a blur. But next thing I know, when he's pitching the ball, and I'm catching it out of midair, right in front of the tailback.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I catch it. We literally bump into each other, and I go off one way, he goes off the other, and then I ran into Rob Ledenham. I guess I was just bumping into everybody along the way. Rob turns me around and points me down the field, and I take off running just as hard as I can go. And my parents used to record all the games. I would listen to them on Saturdays. And evidently I was pulling away from the tailback. And
There's that speed.
yards. And I think I held my breath the whole time. Somewhere around the 30-yard line, I started getting tunnel vision. It was shrinking on me. By the time I crossed the goal line, it was almost blacked out, and I hit the ground and rolled. If it had been 5 yards further, I wouldn't have scored.
Oh, I hope we've got some tape on that. I hope Coach Parrish has that game. That would be awesome. That's a dream play right there.
It really was. It goes, the first thing that come to the sideline, it was like, oh, congratulations. Oh, that was awesome. It's like, when did you learn to run that fast?
Well, when you
Coach, I told you I've been a running back for the last 2 years.
That's right. That's right.
Not a whole lot of call for a 5-second 40 running backs.
That's right. But you made the best of it. Thank you, Bud. We got to scoot for now, guys. But as always, Conversations with Cougars, another awesome discussion. Tonight's with Bud Young, just living some early days in Northview and the first state championship. You guys have a great rest of your week. Be safe. We're not going to be in this pandemic forever, but please continue to be patient and just be safe and do the right thing. We'll catch you next week. Take care.
Go Cougars.
Go Cougars.